Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, guys.
Good morning. Let's not forget that we're going to have our videos on today.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Let's give the others like 3 minutes, then we're going to carry on. Today is one of the most important things that you guys have to understand. If you don't have an understanding of it today, you might have issues. So I want you guys to keep your focus, and I'm going to be forwarding the class record as soon as I'm done. So yeah. Okay, guys. I believe we're going to start now. We've given some time for the others to join. Thank you, guys, for coming. We're just gonna take this time and pray for like 30 seconds. Then we're gonna maybe carry on with the class. I hope that this class is gonna be a wonderful one. So let's bow our heads in prayer. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for yesterday, and we thank you for the gift of life. Father, we pray that you open up our minds as we've decided to study. Lord, give us strength, give us hope. Lord, make us strong and guide and protect us. We thank you for everything. We thank you for a wonderful night. We thank you for our family. We thank you for our loved ones. Father, we pray that you guide and you protect us and you cover us with your blood of Jesus. Amen. All right. We are going to carry on. Today, we are going to be answering the question of what is cloud? I know there's so many of you guys who are here and you are trying to understand what cloud is all about. I remember Stephanie saying yesterday that what is this cloud thing? I don't know anything. So today we are going to see how we can answer that question for everybody. We're going to see how we could answer that question for everybody. All right. Go back to my whiteboard. Believe you guys can see my whiteboard.
Yes.
All right. All right, guys. What is cloud? We're going to talk about the history for a little bit. We're going to talk about the history on how cloud actually came about. So many years ago, you are going to have companies who actually were hosting their applications. Before a company actually builds software and makes software available to customers to start making use of it, that software needs to be hosted on a hardware server. So many years ago, before the cloud came about, for a company to be able to host its data or host its applications, they were going to need to own their hardware servers, which they were going to use to actually run those applications or host and store their data. So for the first thing, I want to explain to you guys what hardware is all about. What is hardware, or what is a computer hardware? Now, guys, a hardware is pretty much just a device like your computer, like your phone, right? That is hardware. And this hardware device actually contains compute and memory capacity. So this hardware actually contains compute and memory capacity. So anytime you hear about hardware, hardware is just pretty much a device that contains compute and memory capacity. So for a company to be able to host an application, or for a company to be able to host and store data, that data needs to be stored in a hardware server. It needs to be stored in a hardware server. A hardware server. A hardware server is just that device that has compute and memory capacity. So that definitely meant that most of these companies in the past, when they had to start building and hosting applications, they were actually going to need hardware servers, which they were going to use to be able to host their applications. Now, because these applications and this data was really, really large and so much, they needed a lot of hardware servers. That definitely meant that they were going to have to build something called data centers. They were going to have to build something called a data center. A data center, just consider a data center to just be a house. Okay, a data center is just a house, right? It's a house that contains hardware in it. It contains computer hardware. That's pretty much what you're going to see in a data center. In a data center, you're just going to see computer hardware. You're going to find computer hardware in these data centers. So data centers are just large buildings that contain computer hardware in them. So what was going to happen is these companies are going to try figuring out how they could actually get land, how they were going to be able to build data centers on this period of on these pieces of land, and how they were going to figure out to buy hardware, which is very expensive, to install this hardware on these data centers. So let's say, for example, Stephanie is an entrepreneur and she actually wants to start a business. And this business actually requires people to be able to buy stuffs from online. That definitely means that Stephanie needs to host an application. So in the past, what Stephanie is going to think about is she's going to figure out where she can actually have hardware, so that on that hardware, she's going to pay people to configure the hardware, right? And also have people build the application and run the application on that hardware. So that meant that Stephanie was not only going to focus on the business side of things, but she's going to focus on paying for data center, paying for hardware, paying for people to come and install the hardware, and even pay for electricity and security of those data centers. So what you're going to find in a data center, that large infrastructure, what you're going to find is you're going to find computer hardware, right? You're going to find hardware servers. These hardware servers are just computational devices which have compute and memory capacity, because applications cannot run alone. Applications needs to be hosted on servers. So in the past, companies were going to have to buy or have a data center. Maybe they were going to rent a piece of land, or they were going to rent data centers, and they were going to install hardware servers inside of those data centers. Now, in these data centers, you're also going to have cables. You're going to have cables, and you're also going to configure network. So you're going to have cables, and you're also going to have your network, because for a hardware to be able to communicate, that hardware actually needs network capacity. So in data centers, you're going to find network components like nodes. You're going to hear about nodes. You're going to hear about switches. You're going to hear about routers and all of that, but you don't actually need to understand all of this. That is pretty much what you're going to find in a data center. So think about you trying to start a small business. You're figuring out how are you going to be able to own hardware servers, because hardware servers are very expensive. How are you going to be able to own hardware servers, pay for the maintenance, pay for the security, pay for the installation, and even pay for the people who are going to be hosting those applications? That was a lot. That was a lot on people. Some companies were not able to start. Small startup companies, they could not start because they were unable to kind of like own data centers by themselves, guys. It was a lot for them. That is why a group of people actually came and they invented something called the cloud, which we're going to talk about. So, guys, I just want to show you a picture of how a data center looks like. I want to show you guys a picture of how a data center looks like. I want to show you guys a picture of how a data center looks like. This is how a data center looks like, guys. You see, this is how a data center looks like. A data center is just a building that has hardware infrastructure inside of it. You can see these are hardware servers which are put together in something called a rack. You see, These are hardware servers. These are all hardware servers. Okay, these are all hardware servers. Now, behind these hardware servers, you're gonna find that there are cables attached to it. There are cables attached to it. So you can see that this infrastructure is very, 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 very big. Very, very, very big. So for a company to actually start their business in the past without the cloud coming in, they were going to have to figure out how they could own their own data centers. That meant that they were going to pay for the building. They were going to pay for the land. They were going to pay for the hardware installations. They were going to pay for buying the hardware. They were going to pay for maintaining the hardware. And they were going to pay for people who were going to actually deploy applications on this hardware. So that is pretty much what a data center is, guys. A data center is nothing but an infrastructure building or a building that contains hardware infrastructures inside of them. Okay, it contains hardware servers. And these hardware servers are those compute devices or those computational devices that have compute and memory capacity. Apart from that, these hardware servers are connected with each other with the use of cables, and also they have network connections inside of them too, because sometimes these clusters might need to talk to these clusters, or these clusters might need to connect with their internet. So they're going to need network capacity. So that is pretty much what a data center is going to have. That is what you're going to find when you go to a data center. Apart from that, you are also going to find storage systems. You're also going to find storage systems. When you go to these places, you're going to find storage. There'll be storage systems too. You're going to have devices which are just sitting there and they are being used for storing large sums of data. And it could be different type of storage systems. Maybe the storage systems could be block storage, which I'm going to explain to you guys in the future. It could be object storage, which I'm going to explain to you guys in the future. Or it could be file system storage, which I'm going to explain to you guys in the future. So when you go to a data center, these are the things that you're going to see. These are the things that you're going to see. You're going to see a large building. In that large building, you're going to see hardware servers inside of them. In that data center, you're going to find that these hardware servers are interconnected with cables. Also, these hardware servers are going to have a network, right? They're going to have network components like nodes, like switches, like routers. Also, in the data center, you're going to find storage equipment like block storage, object storage, file system storage, which I'm going to explain to you guys in the future. We are still talking about the history of cloud, guys. We are still talking about the history of cloud. So that is what used to happen at Zashi Inc. Maybe in 1960, before the cloud came about. When we had to start the business in Zashi Inc., since we are an IT consulting company, we were going to have to deploy or build applications that actually needed us to buy data centers or host data centers where we were going to actually pay for the land on which the data center was going to be hosted on. We're going to pay for the building of that data center. We're going to pay for the buying of the hardware components, like the hardware servers. And we're also going to pay for the electricity, the security, and all those things before even thinking about getting people who were going to install or run or host our applications on those hardware servers. See, that is what used to happen in the past. You can imagine a small company trying to start business and they have to host applications in the past, right? They will need to get things like this. They will need to get hardware, and hardware is very, very expensive. I will always give you guys room to ask your questions. Just allow me to talk and reach to a certain level, and I'll give you guys room to ask your questions, okay? So guys, that is what you're going to find in a data center. Now, my people, we are still talking about the history before cloud actually came in. I told you guys that a hardware server contains compute capacity. It contains compute capacity, which is CPU. It also contains memory capacity. Okay, a hardware server contains compute capacity and it also contains memory capacity. Also, on a hardware server, you are going to have network. You're going to have network. For example, you can consider a hardware server to be a computer. A laptop is an example of a hardware server. On your laptop, you are going to have, your laptop has compute, right? Your laptop has memory, and your laptop also has network capacity, right? What I'm just simply trying to say is, for you to be able to own a hardware server, or for you to be able to know that something is a server, that server needs to have CPU, it needs to have memory, and it also needs to have network capacity, just like your computers. So on this hardware server, you have compute, memory, and network. Now, the next thing is, guys, what is CPU? A CPU actually stands for Central Processing Unit. Every computational device must have CPU. The CPU is just the powerhouse of your computer server. Okay, the CPU is just the powerhouse of your computer server. For activities to be able to run on your computer, those activities are being controlled or are being run by the CPU. Without the CPU on your computer is useless. Without the CPU on your hardware server becomes useless, because it is with the CPU that hardware server has that capability to actually run. Now, apart from that, on a server or on a computer, you're also going to hear about memory. You're going to hear about memory. Guys, what is memory? Memory is just pretty much where you could be able to store maybe data, right? You're storing data, right, temporarily, so that it could be accessed faster. That is why when you have a computer that has high memory, you can be able to access so many things at the same time, right? Because a memory is just pretty much where data is going to be stored or cached, where you're going to have data cached or stored. That's why when they ask you, what is this? And you start thinking and you're like, oh, I cannot recall that. It's pretty much because it is not stored in your brain's memory. It has already been flushed somewhere. So when you have enough memory capacity, it definitely means that you have data which is cached somewhere where you could actually retrieve it very fast. That is the use of memory. And when we talk about memory, think about RAM. Think about RAM. And RAM actually stands for, what does RAM stand for? Let me see if you guys know.
Random access memory.
Random access memory, right? So RAM is a very, very important aspect of your computational device or your hardware server. Now, every hardware server has network. It has network capacity. Reason being that when you have your data or when you have processes running on your hardware, those processes needs to talk to what? They need to talk to your computer disk, or they need to talk to a storage device. So ask yourself, how does information get carried from the storage all the way to the memory? And how does information get carried from memory and flushed into storage? The storage is just pretty much where your data will be stored permanently. Okay, storage just pretty much means that that is where your data will be stored permanently, right? If you have an application data, that data is going to be stored on something called block storage. We're going to talk about that in the future. If you have archived data, maybe data of your past pictures or data of your past history that you just want to keep it somewhere, that data is going to be stored on something called object storage. So ask yourself, how does your computer actually, how does the compute and the memory capacity talk to your storage? That happens through your computer network. Computer network is very, very important. That is why on your hardware, you're going to have the compute capacity, the memory capacity, as well as you're going to have the network capacity. And it is with this network capacity that this hardware has the ability to communicate with the storage. And it is with this network capacity that the hardware has the ability to connect to the outside world, which is the internet. Now, guys, we are still talking about the history of cloud computing. We are still trying to get into it. Now, my people, I want you guys to understand that hardware devices are very expensive. For you to be able to own a hardware server, right, it is very expensive. Now, what people were going to do, what they were going to do was, when they actually have this computer hardware, when they actually have this computer hardware, when they actually have this computer hardware, when they had this computer hardware servers, what they were going to do is, what these people were going to do is, they were going to actually install something on this computer hardware. They were going to install a certain software on this computer hardware server. And that software was actually called hypervisors. They were called hypervisor software. So upon this computer hardware server, they were going to install something called a hypervisor. And you might be asking yourself, what is a hypervisor? Guys, the reason why you have a hypervisor on a computer device, or on a hardware server, is pretty much because you want to be able to have this hardware produce something called virtual computers. Virtual computers. So the reason why you have a hypervisor is just so that you can be able to have your server produce virtual computers. You're going to hear virtual computers or virtual machines. So you're going to have this computer servers. They're going to install hypervisors inside of this computer hardware servers so that it could actually carry out the process of virtualization. And virtualization just simply means that you are hosting or producing virtual computers on your hardware device. I'm going to tell you guys what a virtual machine or a virtual computer is all about. A virtual machine or a virtual computer. So that is what they were going to do. In these data centers, they were going to have these hardware servers, right? Right, Elvis? They were going to have these hardware servers. Upon these hardware servers, they were going to install hypervisor software upon these hardware servers. And the reason why they were installing this hypervisor software is just pretty much because they want to be able to host virtual computers or virtual machines. And you're pretty much going to be hearing something in the future called VMs. which is virtual machines or virtual computers. Now, my people, you might be asking yourself, why are virtual computers important? Why are virtual computers important? Guys, virtual computers are important because on these virtual computers or virtual machines, you could actually have different computers sharing the same hardware, sharing memory, which is in here, and sharing the CPU. So a certain amount of memory is going to be allocated to this machine. A certain amount of CPU is going to be allocated to this machine. A certain amount of memory of this hardware will be allocated to this machine. A certain amount of CPU will be allocated to this machine. So you can see that from the same hardware server, you could have thousands of different computers sharing or sharing this memory and sharing this CPU. And what is going to happen is these different virtual machines which are running are going to have something called an operating system. They were going to have something called an operating system. They were going to have something called an operating system. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that. So that is what happens in these data centers, guys. In these data centers, you're going to find hardware servers. On these hardware servers, they're going to have hypervisor software installed inside of them. The hypervisor software just simply gives that server the ability to carry out the process of visualization. Visualization just simply means that visualization just simply means that your hardware server will have the ability to actually produce virtual machines. And Elvis, it is on these virtual machines where your applications are going to be hosted, right? It is on these virtual machines where you are going to host your applications. These applications could be database applications. These applications could be storage applications. These applications could be web server applications. It could be different kinds of applications. You could host these applications on these virtual machines. A virtual machine is just a computer. A virtual machine is just a computer that is accessible over the internet. Okay, a virtual machine is just a computer that is accessible over the internet. You cannot touch it. So a virtual machine cannot be touched like the way you touch your computer, right? Like the way you touch your computer. No, it is you cannot touch it. It cannot be touched, but you can only see it. You can only see that virtual machine, right? A virtual machine can only be seen, right? It can only be seen. So that is pretty much what this virtual machine is. Okay, guys, that is what a virtual machine is. Now, for a computer to work well, that computer needs an operating system. Guys, for a computer or for a virtual machine to operate well, that virtual machine needs an operating system. That virtual machine needs what? It needs an operating system. What is an operating system, guys? What is an operating system? An operating system is pretty much a software. It's a software that manages computer hardware and other applications installed on your computer. So Stephanie, I believe you have a Windows computer, right? I believe you have a Windows computer. I don't know if you know what a Windows computer is, but I'm still going to teach you. Now, Stephanie, for your computer to operate well, the reason why you're able to install applications on your computer and you're able to make use of those applications on that computer is pretty much because that computer has an operating system. So that operating system is what manages the computer hardware and the applications installed on that computer hardware. Okay, guys. So for you to have a virtual machine operate well, for you to have a computer to operate well, that computer needs an operating system, because it is from that operating system that the applications on that computer are going to interact with the computer hardware. Does that make sense? So that is pretty much what an operating system is. So on these virtual machines, in these data centers, right, you are going to have operating systems. There are different types of operating systems that we have out there, my people. We have operating systems like Linux. We have operating systems like Windows. We have operating systems like Mac OS. These operating systems, some of them are open source, and some of them are licensed. Some of them are licensed. So for you to be able to own these operating systems, or for you to be able to use these operating systems, you might need to get a license. The common operating systems that you have are Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. That is pretty much for computer devices. For your phones, because I told you guys, a phone is a computer device, right? So for your phones are either going to have iOS operating systems, or they're going to have Android operating systems. iOS and macOS is pretty much owned by Apple. Okay, iOS and macOS are operating systems owned by Apple, and these operating systems were actually built from the Linux operating system. So the iOS and the macOS operating system, which is owned by Apple, was pretty much developed from Linux, from the Linux operating system. And I'm going to teach you guys Linux in this course. Okay, I'll teach you guys Linux in this course. Just so you know, Linux is an open source and free operating system. It is open source and it is free. When we say something is open source and free, it pretty much means that the person who developed the Linux operating system, right, he developed it and he made sure that the source code, the code which was used to develop that operating system, was made available for people to make use of it. That is why Apple took that Apple took the code, the source code, Apple took the source code, and Apple was able to use that source code to build their own operating systems upon it. So the Linux operating system is an operating system which is open source. You're going to hear that it is open source and free. When we say something is open source, TK, open source just simply means that the operating system, or the source code, the code which was used to build the operating system, is free. Okay, it is free. It means that it is made available for the public to make use of it. So you, TK, you can take this Linux operating system because it is open source. You can go get the source code and you can add other things into it to form your own operating system. You could call it maybe TK Linux. Okay, so that is why we say that Linux is open source and free, because the source code that was used to build the operating system is made available, right? And people can take it and make use of it and do other things. And also, for you to make use of the Linux operating system, it is free. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for the Linux operating system. It is free. That is what open source actually means. All right. Guys, we are still talking about the history of cloud computing. How did the cloud come about? So, Stephanie, this is what used to happen. Companies are going to need to own their data centers. They're going to need to own their data centers. On these data centers, you can see what they're going to have here, right? This is what they're going to have on these data centers. Okay, my people, this is what they're going to have on these data centers. They're going to have something like this on these data centers. So on these virtual machines, they're going to have their data running as well as their application running. They're going to have their data and they're going to have the application running. So you see, guys, this is pretty much what it looks like. This is what it looks like. Before I continue to the next part of the next part of what I had to explain, I want you guys, I'll give you room to ask your question. So you could put up those hands and I can explain this to you. We are still going to cloud computing. I just wanted to give you guys a background of how things look, like. So you can ask your questions now, if you have any. Raise up your hand. I'm just going to call you up. We have like 2 minutes to answer questions and we continue. Go ahead, Elvis.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. You talked of the hypervisor that we use to enable the hardware to host virtual machines.
Yes.
Those virtual machines, you said they share the same CPU memory. You didn't talk of, I want you to explain a little more on how they share the network. They share the same network, right?
So what is going to happen is, remember that on this hardware server, you're going to have network, right? You're going to have network. And this network is pretty much built out of something called an ENI. Okay, Elvis, there's something called an ENI, but this is I'm using the term used in cloud, but normally you're going to hear about something called a network interface. I think you know that on your computer you have something called a network card, right? Every computer device has something called a network card, and that network card is pretty much what helps your computer to have network. So on this hardware device, Stephanie, there is going to be something here called a network card. Okay, Elvis, this network card is pretty much what helps these virtual machines to have IP addresses. So these virtual machines are going to be allocated private IP addresses. Each of them are going to have private IP addresses. Okay, so that's pretty much what you're going to have here. These different virtual machines which are going to be created are going to have IP addresses. I'm going to talk about this in the future. When we get into networking, I'm going to teach you guys this. But thank you for asking that question. Right. When I say that these different virtual machines are sharing the same memory and CPU, what I mean is the hypervisor has the ability to allocate some part of memory to this virtual machine. It allocates some percentage of memory to this virtual machine, and it could also allocate some percentage of memory to this virtual machine. And you can choose the amount of memory and CPU that you want to allocate to these different virtual machines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. It seems like everybody is clear. All right. Please, if you're worried, make sure you ask your question. All right, go ahead, Jared.
So the hypervisor is just a software that on the main CPU, main computer, that's allowing these virtual machines to be managed, correct?
Yes. So the hardware is that software. Sorry. The hypervisor is that software installed inside of your hardware servers in those data centers, so that computer hardware server can be able to produce virtual machines. virtual machines, virtual computers. Without the hypervisor, there is no way virtual machines can be created on those hardwares. Okay, and the hypervisor makes it in such a way that it makes it in such a way that each of these virtual machines, right, are segregated from each other. This one does not know what is running in here, and this one does not know what is running in here. So the virtual machine, the hypervisor does in such a way that these virtual machines are segregated from each other. But trust me, you're never going to see hypervisors in your place of work. You're never going to see things like this. I'm just trying to get you guys into cloud computing for you guys to understand what the cloud really is all about. So I want to answer that question, but I want to make sure that when I'm giving you guys the definition of cloud computing and what cloud is all about, you'll be able to understand it. Does that make sense? All right. Any hands up? All right. There are no hands up. Okay, guys. So remember, in these data centers, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? What is going to happen? The company that owns the data center is going to pay for the land or the surface area which is going to be used for hosting that data center. That data center, you're going to have to pay for the land. You're going to have to pay for the infrastructure provisioning, the building of the data center. You're going to have to pay for the buying of the hardware servers, which is very expensive. You pay for that. And you're also going to pay for the installations. You're going to pay for electricity and all of that. You're going to pay for electricity. Why am I not able to spell electricity today? So you can see that that is pretty much what is going to be happening here. Also on these data centers, you're going to have storage. You're going to have storage systems. You're going to have storage systems like iSCSI, which is pretty much used for block storage. You're never going to hear about iSCSI, please. You're going to hear about other storage systems like file systems. I'm also going to hear about archive systems that you have on premises and things like that. So you're going to have storage devices. You have storage devices. I want you guys to understand that. Virtual machines just contain compute, memory, and network capacity. But remember, virtual machines, they need storage. They need to store data, right? That is why the hypervisor is going to help you to be able to connect these virtual machines to a storage capacity. The hypervisor is going to help you connect these virtual machines to a storage capacity. Sometimes these will be connected to this storage capacity over the network, or sometimes it could be physically attached to the virtual machines. So there are two ways this storage capacity will be allocated to this. It could be allocated through network attachments, or it could be allocated physically to these virtual machines. My people, we are just talking about data centers, which you are never going to see in your life. I'm still trying to make you guys get acquainted with how things used to be in the past and how the cloud has transformed everything. Okay? So don't bother about trying to understand a lot of these things. I'm just trying to make you guys understand how data centers are provisioned and what you're going to see inside of them. So as years passed by and months passed by, companies were complaining. They were complaining about security of their data centers. Companies were complaining. Small businesses were complaining that they found it difficult to actually excel in their business because they needed to buy hardware servers. They needed to buy hardware servers, and hardware servers were very expensive. So there was no excellence for them because they couldn't actually they never had enough capital to buy hardware servers. And sometimes they were going to rent hardware. And when they rent that hardware, the people that provided the hardware pieces to them, they were going to maybe steal maybe some of their thing, or maybe do stuff on their applications that they never liked. Other companies were complaining about deployments. They were saying that the time it takes for them to be able to deploy the applications on these virtual machines, or to deploy the applications on these data centers, it was actually very, 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 very long. So deployments were taking very, very long time. Apart from that, companies were complaining about efficiency, performance efficiency. Imagine that the hardware server gets full, the memory and the CPU gets full. You need to start figuring out how you're going to buy more hardware attached to the other hardware and actually try to configure it. So efficiency was very slow. Anytime you hear about data centers, think about on-prem, okay? Sometimes you're going to hear people saying that I have an on-prem data center. An on-prem data center just simply means that the company has a data center created or hosted in their environment. Okay, that's pretty much what on-prem simply means. With on-prem, it just simply means that they have their own data center. They are hosting their applications on their own data center. So companies were complaining about security. They were complaining about operational excellence. They were complaining about efficiency, right? They were complaining about deployments. The time it took for them to be able to deploy was very long. Some companies too, they were complaining about costs. Guys, it is very expensive to own this thing. You need to pay for electricity, you need to pay for hardware, you need to pay for infrastructure, you need to pay for the land. It is really expensive. You even need to pay for security. Who are the people who are going to secure this physical hardware components? So cost was a very big issue. These are the problems people used to face, my people. These are the problems people used to face. And that is why a group of people came together, different group of people, they came together and they decided that they were going to actually invent something called the cloud. They were going to invent something called the cloud. When we talk about cloud, what do we mean, George? Cloud just simply means that you are giving somebody access to your computer over the internet. Okay, that is pretty much what the cloud means. The cloud just simply means that, hey, George, yes, you have that physical hardware. You have that memory and that you have that memory, you have that CPU and everything. You have that computer. Here I am. I'm a customer. You are giving me access to your computer over the internet. Right, George? So you're giving me access to your computer over the internet. And on this computer, George, what are you going to have? You're going to have maybe different services I could make use of, or you are giving me access to this computer so that I can be able to run my applications inside of it. George, that definitely means that I will not have to bother about the hardware server. I, as a customer, I will not have to bother about the hypervisor. I will not have to bother about that networking piece because you are going to be the one taking care of that for me. Does that make sense? So with cloud, it just simply means that I am giving somebody access to my computer over the internet. He can use it to be able to run his applications. He can use it to be able to access maybe some of the other applications I already have there. And he's only going to pay me for what he uses. If he doesn't use it, he's not going to pay me for it. That is what cloud is talking about. Cloud just simply means that I am giving Stephanie access to my computer over the internet so that she can be able to access other applications that are there, or so that she can be able to host her applications, or so that she can be able to store her data. You guys have been making use of Google Drive, correct? You guys are making use of Google Drive. Google Drive is an example of cloud, TK. You guys have been making use of Netflix, right? Netflix is an example of a cloud-based application. You guys have been making use of different kind of applications, and most of them are all cloud-based applications. So when we talk about cloud, what we mean is cloud just simply means that I am giving you access to my computer over the internet. So, CK, this is what happens. I have that computer, right? I have that computer. And on this computer, CK, on this computer, just that's an O. On this computer, you have your software applications. On this computer, there is enough memory and CPU too as well. Now, TK, you're giving me, Akuma, access to that computer. You're giving me access to that computer, TK. That definitely means that I can be able to access or make use of these applications on this computer. And I can also be able to store my data on this computer. And I can also be able to make use of some of these applications to build my own applications, while you're going to be taking care of that computer hardware and everything. All I need to bother about is I just need to run my applications on it. And you're going to be the one taking care of the hardware, the networking, the hypervisor, and all of those things. This from here to here, you're going to be the one taking care of it, right? And all I need to bother about is running my applications and my data on my virtual machines and all of that. Does that make sense? That is pretty much what cloud is all about. So when we talk about cloud, cloud just simply means that giving someone access to your computer over the internet. Okay, TK. So I'm giving you access to my computer over the internet. Okay, that is pretty much what cloud is all about. Now, the next thing I would like you guys to understand is the aspect of cloud computing. So TK, what is cloud computing? We've spoken about cloud, right? But what is cloud computing? What is cloud computing? When we talk about cloud computing, what do we mean? What do we mean? What is cloud computing? What is cloud computing? Guys, before I explain to you guys what cloud computing is, let me take this time and tell you guys what happened in the past. So when this group of people came together, Uncle Fred, when this group of people came together, what they decided was, they decided that, hey, people are complaining so much about security. They are complaining so much about costs. They are complaining so much about having to own data centers by themselves. Guys, why don't we build data centers around the world, in different parts of the world, and give and build some services or some applications on them, and give customers access to these data centers over the internet, so that they can be able to make use of these applications, or they can be able to make use of these services to run their applications on them. We are going to be the ones taking care of the hardware and everything. And what these people need to do is they just need to make use of these services, and they're only going to pay for what they use. So this group of people came together And this group of people are called cloud providers. An example of a cloud provider is Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is a company which is owned, or is a cloud provider. It's a cloud provider which is owned by Amazon. So Amazon Web Services is a cloud provider which is owned by Amazon. Okay, it is owned by Amazon. And what the cloud provider is doing is, he's saying that my people are complaining so much about having to host data centers or manage data centers by themselves. So what I'm going to do is, Yenzi, I am going to create data centers or build data centers in different parts of the world. I'll create them in Africa. I'll create them in Europe. I'll create them in Asia. I'll create them in North America. I'll create them in different parts of the world. I'll create these data centers. These are data centers, my people. Now, on these data centers, I'm going to be the one taking care of the data center. I'll take care of everything on that data center. I am also going to have I'm going to build services. I'll build services on these data centers. I'll build services on these data centers. I'll build services inside of these data centers. I'll build services inside of these data centers. I'll have services. So many different services. It could be compute services. It could be storage services. It could be database services. I'll build services on these data centers. And I'm going to now have customers. So I'll get into an agreement with customers. And I'll say, hey, customer, I can give you access to these services so that you can make use of it to host your applications on. So you can make use of these services hosted on my data centers. You can make use of these services to host your applications. Now, Mr. Customer, you are only going to pay for what you use. So when you make use of these services, right, TT, you're only going to pay for what you use. The time you are making use of it, you're going to pay for it. When you stop making use of these services, you are not going to pay for it. So that is what these people decided to do. They were going to provide these data centers. They're going to build data centers in different parts of the world. They're going to build these data centers in different parts of the world. They were going to provide services on these data centers so that customers can be able to access these services over the internet. And they can make use of these services to be able to host their applications or store their data on these services. The customers don't need to bother about the hardware. So even if the hardware goes down, they should not bother because we're taking care of that. And we are promising them that we are always going to make sure that it is highly available. We are assuring them that these services will be highly available. These customers can be able to host their applications in data centers that we own, maybe in America, or they can decide to host it in Canada, or they can decide to host it in Europe, or they can decide to host it in Asia or in Africa. We are going to take care of the security of these data centers. That's what the cloud provider is saying. We will take care of the data centers. We will take care of the security. We will make sure that the data which is stored in here is properly secured and maintained. We are assuring you that promise. Guys, that is pretty much what is happening. So when we talk about cloud computing, my people, cloud computing is just the on-demand sale of IT services. So cloud computing, guys, is the on-demand online sale of IT services with a pay as you go model. So it's with a pay as you go model. So it's an on-demand sale of IT services with a pay as you go model. These IT services could be compute services. It could be compute services. These services could be storage services. It could be network services. It could be network services. Apart from that, it could be database services. It could be machine learning services. You see, there are so many storages that the cloud provider provides, my people. So cloud computing, right, is just the on-demand sale of IT services. The on-demand sale of IT services with a pay-as-you-go model. That's pretty much what cloud computing is. What we're just simply talking about is these people are assuring us the cloud provider is the one providing these computing services. Okay, they are giving us access to these services over the internet so that we can be able to make use of these services, right? So customers have to provision, customers do not have to provision, they don't have to provision data centers again. Okay, customers do not have to provision data centers. No, they don't have to. Okay, the cloud provider is going to be the one providing you these services. They're going to actually create data centers in different parts of the world, and they're going to have you access these data centers over the internet to be able to host your applications or run your applications. So that is pretty much what cloud computing is all about. That is what cloud computing is all about, guys. Cloud computing is just the on-demand sale of IT services with a pay-as-you-go model. It just definitely means that you are only paying for what you use. You're only paying for what you use. So let's talk about some of the properties of cloud computing. Let's talk about some of the properties of cloud computing. Right? Let's talk about some of the properties of cloud computing. Guys, one thing about cloud computing is that it uses a shared model. Cloud computing uses a shared model. When we talk about a shared model, what do we mean? We just simply mean that don't forget that you're not going to be the only customer making use of these services, right? These services are provided to anybody who actually accepts the SLA agreement, right? So what will happen is those services are hosted on data centers, and those infrastructures are shared infrastructures. They are shared infrastructures. It pretty much means that you're going to have different customers. You're going to have different customers. These are customers up here. You're going to have different customers. So guys, please just take a look. These are customers up here, okay? These are different customers. And then these are the hardware infrastructures. So you're going to have different customers making use of, they're going to be sharing these infrastructures, right? They'll be hosting or running their applications on these infrastructures. But the cloud provider is promising us that these customers' data, or the customer's data stored on these hardware components, are properly secured in such a way that customer A does not know what is going on with customers B data. So the cloud provider is going to be making sure that the data here stored on the hardware servers are properly secured and taken care of. So with cloud or with cloud computing, one thing I would like you guys to understand is that cloud computing makes use of, there is a shared model. Okay, there is a shared model. There's a shared model. The infrastructure is being shared, right? There is not just one customer making use of the infrastructure. It is being shared. Okay, the infrastructure is being shared and customers can be able to host the applications or run the applications on those infrastructures. And the cloud provider is going to be the one taking care of that data center and everything there. You as a customer, you're only going to pay for what you use. So the next property of cloud computing is the pay-as-you-go model. Pay-as-you-go model. Pay-as-you-go model just simply means that you have the right to make use of a service. You can use it for as much as you want to make use of it, and you're only going to pay for what you use. And when you stop using it, you don't pay for it anymore. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? So you're going to pay only for what you use, right? When you're making use of the services, you're going to be paying for it, TK. So you're going to be paying for it maybe based on time. Maybe be paying for it per hour, maybe per second, and all of that. Then as soon as you're done making use of it, right, when you stop making use of it, you don't pay for it anymore. So this is one important aspect of cloud computing. The next thing, my people, is that with cloud computing, one other property about cloud computing is that with cloud computing, it is only, these services are only available over the internet. The services are only available over the internet. So, guys, what do I mean? If you do not have internet connection, you will not be able to access these services. Okay, Stephanie, if you do not have internet connection, you will not be able to access these services. Guys, that's pretty much what cloud computing is all about. All right, I've spoken so much, and these are the ones I want you guys to start getting. So please, I want you guys to put up those hands, and then I can take any questions that you have. Please, you will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and we go back into the class. If you don't want to ask the question, you could actually just send a message on the chat bar, and then I'm gonna make sure I answer your question. Any questions, guys? Any questions?
Yes, I just have an observation, Prof.
Okay.
So based on what you've been explaining so far, I have come to understand that cloud computing has come as a result of some of the shortcomings of the old system.
Yes.
Where, companies couldn't bear the cost, the very expensive cost of maintaining those data centers.
Yes.
And then a group of IT professionals came out with the cloud computing to be able to, give these services, give accessibility to these services to users across the world. And users can only pay for what they use. That's the pay-as-you-go model.
Yes.
So that's my own understanding. So cloud computing has come as a result of the shortcomings of the old system.
Yes, that's good. You're getting it. You're getting it. I'm proud of you, son. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. That's good. That's good.
Thank you very much, bro.
That's good. That's good. I can see that you're getting it. All right, Stephanie, if you are in a quiet environment, you can tell me what you've understood based on everything we've been talking about here. Is she here? All right.
I have a question.
All right, go ahead, Charlie.
Sorry. You said pay as you go. If I should say that. Now, if you stop paying, what happens to your information? What happens to all your data?
Good. That's a good one. This one is going to happen. This is what is going to happen. When you are making use of a cloud provider, Mama, when you're making use of a cloud provider, what will happen is you are going to be accessing these services in an account. You are going to be accessing these services inside an account. Okay, Chari. So you're going to own an account, and in that account, you're going to have those services that you can be able to access, and you can now run your data. You can now make use of those services to actually host your applications and all of that. Now, what the cloud provider does is every month, you're going to get your bill.
Yes.
Okay, Uncle Fred, you're going to get your bill every month. So every month you're going to get a monthly bill, right? So normally you always attach your card. You always attach your card to your account, right?
Yes.
So that they could actually just charge you out of that card. But now, if they try charging you and it does not go through, they're going to send you like 3 warnings. If you don't adhere to those warnings, what they're going to do is they're going to block your account, but it does not mean that you're going to lose your data. They might just stop those things from running, right? They might stop you from accessing the services, and they're going to stop your applications from running until you meet up to those financial commitments.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question. Good question. Any other questions? Put your hand up.
I have a follow-up question.
All right, let's make sure we put those hands up. But go ahead and ask your question, brother. I think it's Prince Peter.
So what happens if you want to finally take out your data from cloud? Is that possible?
I mean, if you want to take out your data from cloud, it definitely means that you have somewhere you want to move the data to, right? So maybe you might want to take out the data from cloud, maybe because you want to move it to a data center. Yes, you can migrate that information from
cloud. Is that going to cost you money?
I mean, yeah, it's going to cost you money. And that is why instead, Prince Peter, what is happening is most companies who used to own their data centers, they are now moving their applications to the cloud. So most companies now are instead moving their applications. They are moving their applications to the cloud. They are moving these applications to the cloud so that they could actually run the applications on the cloud and actually achieve better costs and also achieve better performance for the applications, as well as achieve more security for those applications.
Okay, so far as cloud computing is concerned, are there any drawbacks, like any disadvantage, like downside of cloud computing?
Yeah, we'll come into that. I'll come into that. I love your questions. We'll come into that. I'll not answer it now. I'm going to answer it in some few minutes, okay? Go ahead, Jeremiah.
So my question is with regards to taking your stuff out of the cloud. So I understand Amazon Web Services is being owned and controlled and managed by Amazon, right? Yeah. Let's say you had a cloud service provider. You were also a cloud service provider, and I figured, I was like, hey, so Amazon is charging me $200 to store my stuff on the cloud, and I feel that you charging me like $100, which is like $100 less. So what if I wanted to migrate my stuff from your cloud, from Amazon Web Services to your own cloud? Is that a possibility, and how is that gonna take place?
All right. Now I had a scenario where, let me just answer the question. Let me make you feel happy. Let me answer your question. All right, my people, when I was working in one of my clients' environment, my client actually, okay, please, can I answer that question in like 5 minutes? Let me just explain something. Can I answer? Let me just explain something. Okay, thank you, bro. All right, my people, we've been talking about cloud computing. I've been talking about leveraging those services that that cloud computing actually comes with. But who provides those services? Who provides cloud computing services? Who provides cloud computing services, guys? The person that provides cloud computing services is called a cloud provider. The person that provides cloud computing services is called a cloud provider. So a cloud provider is that individual or that organization that provides cloud computing services to customers. Right, Gerard? That's pretty much what a cloud provider is. And we have an example, or we have different cloud providers. For example, Blink, we have AWS, Amazon Web Services, right? That is a cloud provider. And Amazon Web Services, like we said, is owned by Amazon and is the largest cloud provider in the world. Okay, in terms of infrastructure and in terms of services, Amazon Web Services is the largest cloud provider in the world. Apart from that, Georgie, another cloud provider that we have is Microsoft Azure. Okay, Microsoft Azure is the second largest cloud provider, and Microsoft Azure is owned by Microsoft. Apart from that, you also have cloud providers like GCP. And GCP just pretty much means Google Cloud Platform. And it is owned by Google. And Google Cloud Platform is the fastest is the fastest growing cloud provider, and it is anticipated that Google Cloud Platform in the future is really going to grow very large, and that is why I'm going to advise you guys. As soon as you get jobs, it is very good for you guys to start studying GCP because GCP is fastly growing. Sometimes they even offer free certification courses and all of that, and they even give you guys certifications for free. GCP is fastly growing, guys. GCP has been pulling AWS's customers and Microsoft Azure's customers. GCP is fastly growing, and it's good for you guys to study GCP as soon as you get your jobs. Okay? Because in the future, you're going to realize that there'll be so many customers making use of GCP platform. Apart from that, we have other small cloud providers like Alibaba Cloud. Then we also have IBM Cloud, which is one of the first clouds that we ever had. We also have Oracle Cloud. These are different cloud providers that provide us with these different cloud computing services. And we said those cloud computing services could be compute services, storage services, big data services, network services, database services, and all of that. So, guys, that is what a cloud provider is. Now, these cloud providers have made it in such, so these are public cloud providers. Write it down. Those are public cloud providers. They are public cloud providers, okay? These are all public cloud providers. I'm going to explain to you guys what public cloud is and private cloud is. Guys, these cloud providers, what they have done is they have given customers the ability, like for example, if you had customers who had their own on-prem data center, customers who were actually owning their own data center and everything, they have the ability to help these customers migrate their data or migrate their applications into these cloud providers' data centers. So for example, if your company was hosting their data or the applications on their own on-prem data center, and they later realized that there was a lot of costs which they are spending, and they want to make use of AWS. AWS has services that can help these customers to migrate their data from these on-prem data centers into the AWS cloud. Also, Georgie, you have scenarios where you can have AWS, a customer can be making use of AWS as his cloud provider. So the customer is hosting his application and his data on AWS, right, Georgie? And that customer now wants to move to GCP, maybe because he feels that GCP is cheap sometimes GCP can actually reach out to a customer and tell the customer that, hey, we are going to offer you discount. We're going to offer you 20% discount for the next 5 years if you come and host your applications on our platform. So what's going to happen, Georgie? GCP2 has services which can help the customer move his data from AWS into the GCP platform. Blink, did that answer your question? Where is it? Did I answer your question?
Yes, that did.
Good. So you see, you also have services that you can actually use to migrate data from customers' on-prem location into the cloud platform. You also have services which you can use to move or migrate customers' applications from one cloud provider to another cloud provider. All right, go ahead, Stephanie.
You said we used to use hardware. Okay,
Yes.
but it was so expensive.
Yes.
Now that we are using our cloud, are we still using the hardware?
All right.
Some
Okay.
company...
Let me explain. Does somebody want to explain that to her? Is anybody who can explain that to her? Anybody wants to try to explain that?
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Titi.
Okay, so what he was saying was, like back in the day, in order to like host, all your applications and data and, store everything, you needed to like, first of all, get land to like build a, building to like put all the hardware inside, and you have to buy all the equipment. You have to pay for security, you have to pay for like electricity and like employ all the people who are gonna be working there. And that was very expensive. So that's why these people came together, like investors. They came together, like investors and like, like cyber IT people, they came together to build this big, establishments to like, host all this hardware and stuff. These people can afford the land, they can afford the electricity, they can afford like, everything they need to like host the hardware. So hardware is still involved, but the thing is, these people they provide like cloud services with like using the hypervisors, like Akuma said, to provide virtual machines. So what like a regular person like me is gonna use for my business is gonna be a virtual machine, because these people they have the hardware. So the hardware is still involved, but the thing is out of my hands now. The companies own it. I just pay to use their services, which they provide through the cloud. So their hardware is still a thing, but the thing is, they're now owned by the big companies that have the money to pay for it.
All right, brother,
Let me add. Can I add something to that too?
Yeah, I want you guys to be talking. Very important.
So
that's interview 101.
It's not like this hardware is like out of the picture. It's still there. Like Amazon has so much money. They create all this. They know that, okay, if I create this servers in Africa, in South Africa, in all of these continents, people now are gonna turn to feel like, why do I have to pay security? Why do I have to go buy a land when I'm gonna probably need this application? Somebody might probably want to run an application for 2 years. So now they have to go buy a piece of land, do all of this stuff to run this application that they are in their business perspective is just gonna run for 2 years. So they'll rather just go buy a certain cloud service and then use it for that length of time and then kill the application or software. So it benefits them to just make use of the cloud instead of going to go through all this security, because I don't know if I'm totally correct, but I think some certain businesses, you have to like, when they go through like their security checks and stuff, you have to pass some security checks that they are required, like your security of your business, this, that, and the third, and all of that. So you have to make sure you go through all of that to get like contracts with certain kind of companies. Like if you want a government contract and you say, oh, I provide this, my application can run this, that, and the third, they'll be like, okay, so what is the security level of your business or of your software? Can you make sure that the data that we're giving you is actually safe? Do you have on-site security? Do you have CCTV cameras to make sure that anybody that comes in here can be caught on the camera and stuff like that? So that's how I feel and believe it's still running.
You guys have answered the question already.
Excuse me.
Yeah, just give me a second. So you guys have answered the questions already. And Stephanie, remember in the past, what's going to happen is you're going to have to own a data center. Stephanie, that just simply means that you are going to need to configure networking. You're going to need to own hardware servers. You're going to need to install hypervisors and manage them. You're going to need to do all of these things on your data center. But now with the cloud provider now is going to be the one having these data centers. Okay, so he's taking that ownership away from you, right? He's taking that amount of work that you had to do or that you had to do. He's taking that away from you by having to create these data centers in different parts of the world. And the only thing you're going to need to bother about is you're just going to need to be bother about running your applications on those data centers. Okay, you'll be accessing them over the internet, and you'll be accessing them as services because they're going to actually have a lot of services running on those data centers you could actually make use of. You can use those services to be able to run or host or store your application data. But in the past, you're going to need to set up all of this. This you can see on my screen. You're going to need to be able to set up all of this. This is how data center, this was the data center. You're going to need to own all of this. But now what will happen is the cloud provider takes care of this, takes care of this, takes care of this. Then he provides services, which could be platform as a service services, which could be infrastructure as a service services, or it could provide you services, which could be SaaS. And we're going to explain all of this, but just so you know, they're going to be the ones owning the data centers. So now if you want to start your business, Stephanie, all you just need to do is you just need to reach out to AWS, create an AWS account. You can make use of their services that they have there to host your applications without having now to go buy hardware servers and configure them and pay for people to manage them and pay for people to come and run those applications for you. You can now go to Amazon. You can create an AWS account. You can make use of their services now to host your applications. And you're not only going to focus on your business. So you can now have people who are just going to come in now to host your application for you. You don't need to start thinking about how am I going to get hardware? How am I going to configure routers and switches and all of that? No, all of that has been taken care of for you by the cloud provider. Okay. Please, you can go through this video again. I was talking too fast. You have the whole week to go over the video, and I believe that some things are going to be clear. Let's take a 10 minutes break. Then anybody who has a question during this break, you can ask, please. Please, let's take a 10 minutes break. So we are going to be back at 11:47 Eastern time. Thank you, guys. All right, the hands which are up, please, you can ask your questions.
Yes, Prof. When I hear of cloud computing, then I hear of hardwares. So are these hardwares in the cloud, or cloud is just a name to?
Yeah, the cloud just simply means that maybe you never caught when I was saying it that time, but the cloud just simply means that the person, somebody has a computer or somebody has a data center, right? And he's giving you access to that data center over the internet. That's pretty much why they're saying cloud.
Okay.
So it's also a data center, my brother. It's also the difference between cloud and on-prem is that you, the customer, you're going to be the one owning the data center, right? But now with cloud computing, the cloud provider will be the one owning the data center, and is going to be giving you access to it over the internet to be able to host your applications or run your applications or store your application data.
Perfect.
Does that make sense now?
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I have some running notes here. I'm going to send that over to you. Giving someone access to your computer over the internet. And if you go over the video again, it's going to make more sense.
Please, I have something to ask.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Based on what Thierry said, that with the cloud, the hardware still exists, but it's now in the cloud. So I want to ask, does the cloud now become a software? because
okay, yeah. Sometimes it's gonna take time for you to digest something like this. Charlie.
Yeah.
What is gonna happen is if you have to own a data center, what's gonna happen? It means you have to buy a piece of land, you have to host everything inside of it. You have to you have to create a data center, you have to
have the physical materials.
Good, everything. Now, see, with cloud, right? The difference is that the cloud provider is going to be the one owning the data centers. He'll be the one taking care of everything there, right? Now, he's also going to create things called services. Services are just applications that you can use. And upon those applications, you can also be able to host, store, or run your applications on them. So you're using an application to maybe host your own application, right? But where are those services hosted? They are hosted in those data centers that the cloud provider owns. Then you are now accessing those services now over the internet. Let me draw something for you.
Okay, so meaning at the end of the day, the data center still exists.
The data center still exists, but it is owned by the cloud provider. And on those data centers now, the cloud provider is going to actually build things called services. Okay. Yeah. And those services are what they are going to provide to the customer.
And what we now use.
Good. Well, yeah. So we're going to use those services to be able to host our applications on those services and to be able to run our applications on those services or to even store our application data on those services, right? But where are the services hosted on? The services are hosted on the cloud providers' data centers. And that is why for us to be able to access those services, we are accessing those services over the internet. And also, while making use of those services, we are only going to pay for what we use. If we do not use them, we're not going to pay for them.
Okay, another question on that.
Yes.
So if the cloud provider's data center collapses, crashes, we lose our data.
Good. That is why the cloud provider is going to ensure that you have high availability. We're coming there, Mama. Let's keep that question.
Thank you.
I'm going to kill you. Why do I even want to teach? Super, I'm going to kill you questions. That's good. All right.
Don't give up yet.
I have a question.
Okay, bro, go ahead.
Yes, I want to ask that you said most of the services on given out by these cloud providers are shared services. What if a customer says, no, I want to own my own block storage? Can it work?
Block storage is built on a service, bro. So in a
I want to own a service by myself. I don't want to share.
Okay, means you're gonna have to have your own private cloud. You're gonna have to have your own private cloud. There's certain things I'm gonna explain to you, but what you have to understand is that when I talk about shared services, right? I just simply mean that those services, our customers are going to be, those services are actually hosted on a shared infrastructure because that infrastructure is available for all customers who are making use of that service, right? But AWS tries to make sure that customers' data is only available to them. Only the customer has access to the data. Even the cloud provider does not have access to that data. So even the cloud provider, right, cannot actually see what you are actually hosting inside of those data centers. And those data centers have gone through a lot of different regulations, right? There are different regulations that they have actually gone through and they've actually approved that those data centers are good enough. They are actually very secure. And even the cloud provider does not know what you have going on in there. So if you say that, no, I want to actually own things by myself and all of that, then you will need to actually create your own private cloud. But what these cloud providers have done is for the American government, they have actually created something called GovCloud. So the American government has its GovCloud. So those infrastructures which are there, or those data centers are only used for hosting applications for the American government, right? Yeah, we're going to talk about that in the future, but those are good questions. When we say things like this, a lot of things now, you start asking yourself questions, but what is this? What is this? But it's good. We're going to talk about most of these things. Please, at least stand up and stretch out. We have about 1.5 hours again to go. So